Shalom, and welcome to this presentation on the 70 Weeks Revealed, Part 4, DaniEl, Chapter 9, 27, by Daniel Fuentes, servant of YHWSHWA. How this knowledge was gained. I give all honor and praise to the Most High, YHWSHWA. I have sought Him in humility, through much prayer and study, deep reflection over periods of time, with much correction that continues to this very day. All revelation proceeds from Ruach Qodesh. If any errors are found, they are attributable to my own human nature and not to the Most High, for I am not yet perfect, but am striving on the narrow path. Let us get into the word of the Almighty. DaniEl chapter 9, 27. And he shall confirm a covenant with many for 1 week, and in the middle of the week he shall put an end to slaughtering and meal offering, and on the wing of abominations he shall lay waste, even until the complete end, and that which is decreed is poured out on the one who lays waste. Now, please pay attention to some of the texts that I highlighted in purple. First, we have to understand that the he who they're referring to, which is confirming a covenant for a week, this is speaking of the anti-Messiah, who is also known as the little horn of the fourth beast in the book of DaniEl, and is also known as the beast or the scarlet beast in the book of Revelation. So this one will confirm a covenant for 1 week. Now, this is speaking of 1 week of years. In part 1 of this teaching on the 70 weeks of DaniEl revealed, we found evidence and confirmation that this scripture, DaniEl 9:27, can be proven through other scriptures in DaniEl and Revelation to be referring to a 7-year period when it's referring to this week. And we were able to then understand that the entire 70 weeks are therefore justified as being 7-year periods each week. Now here it's saying that in the middle of the week, which means after the first 3.5-year period of the week is finished, that's when this anti-Messiah, little horn, will put an end to the slaughtering and meal offering. Now that has to do with the temple that's going to be built, where they are going to be making slaughtering and meal offerings to the Almighty. So after the first 3.5 years of this week, as he's transitioning into his own 42-month or 3.5-year period, this anti-Messiah, this scarlet beast, this little horn, is going to put an end to the slaughtering and meal offering. So he's breaking the covenant that he made. And during this time, he's going to be laying waste that house of the Almighty, that temple. He's going to be laying it waste, and that's what we find in other proof scriptures that we'll be looking at. And it says here, until the complete end, which we know that this has to do with Revelation chapter 19. That's the complete end, when the Messiah comes on the white horse for battle, to do battle with this beast and the false Messiah and their army of nations. And we also know that leading up to that battle at Har Megiddo, we also see that there are 7 bowls of wrath that are going to be poured out in the book of Revelation. And that's what is being referred to here at the end. That which is decreed is poured out on the one who lays waste, because each of those bowls of wrath is judgment against this beast. Now, the question that I would like answered, that I would like for you all to consider is, we know this is referring to a week. which week is this referring to? Before we answer the question regarding which week in the 70-week count is being referred to in DaniEl 9:27, I want to point out that there's a very powerful link between DaniEl 9:27 and also DaniEl 12:11 and Matthew 24:15 through 22, and we're going to make that quick association here. So as we've already read in DaniEl 9:27, this is referring of the beast, the little horn, the anti-Messiah. And I want us to pay attention to some of the highlighted text in white. And you'll notice that there's a connection here where it verifies that this beast, this anti-Messiah, this little horn, on the wing of abominations he shall lay waste. So he's the one who's known as, in other translations, the abomination of desolation, because of what he's going to do to the Almighty's house, also known as a temple. Now, we're going to go to DaniEl chapter 12, verse 11. DaniEl chapter 12, verse 11 reads, "And from the time that which is continual is taken away." Now we can look at DaniEl 9:27 to see what this little horn is putting an end to. He's putting an end to slaughtering and meal offering. So that's that which is continual, which will be taken away. Going back to DaniEl chapter 12, verse 11, "And from the time that which is continual is taken away, and the abomination that lays waste is set up, is 1,290 days." So again, this one that is going to lay waste, here in DaniEl chapter 12, verse 11, it's known as the abomination that lays waste, is set up. He's literally going to be set up in the house of the Almighty on earth. He wants people to believe that he is the Almighty One. So he's going to set himself up in that house. So again, the connection here, it says it's going to be 1,290 days when that happens. And how one calculates that is that the first 3.5 years of this 1 week is going to be a time period where the two witnesses of the Almighty are going to be doing their time of prophecy. They're going to be given that 1,260 days, which is 3.5 years. Now, at the end of their witness, this very same beast here, this very same little horn, is going to put them to death. We're going to read about that. He's going to put them to death. And then he begins his 42 months, or 3.5 years. So DaniEl 12:11 is telling us that after the first 1,260 days of those two witnesses' testimony, that first 3.5 years, 30 days into the next 3.5 years, which is a month into the beast's reign, he's going to already be set up in the house of the Almighty. Praise Yah. Now we're going to go to one additional text here in Matthew chapter 24. Matthew chapter 24. We're going to read verses 15 through 22. Matthew chapter 24, verse 15. This is YHWSHWA speaking. "So when you see the abomination that lays waste, spoken of by DaniEl the prophet, set up in the set apart place." So again, this is the house of the Almighty in the set apart place where he set up. "He who reads, let him understand. Then let those who are in Yehuda flee to the mountains. Let him who is on the housetop not come down to take whatever out of his house. And let him who is in the field not turn back to get his garments. And woe to those who are pregnant and to those who are nursing in those days. And pray that your flight does not take place in winter or on the Sabbath. For then there shall be great distress, also known as great tribulation, such as has not been since the beginning of the world until this time, no, nor ever shall be. And if those days were not shortened, no flesh would be saved, but for the sake of the chosen ones, those days shall be shortened." Praise Yah. So, if the Almighty would let this beast, this little horn, continue his reign beyond those 42 months, he would destroy all of humanity. But the Almighty has given him only 3.5 years, only 42 months to do the things he's going to do. So praise Yah. This is evidence that this is speaking of the same one, the abomination who lays waste, who causes desolation. And it's evidence in these three scriptures being associated together. Now we're going to answer the question regarding which week out of the 70 weeks is this week spoken of here in DaniEl 9, chapter 9, verse 27. What about the 69th week? So, the first 62 weeks in the count were already fulfilled before the Messiah was cut off. We found proof of that in DaniEl chapter 9, verse 26. The first 62 weeks were already fulfilled before the Messiah was cut off. And then, from the 63rd to the 68th weeks, they're already accounted for and include the period from the death of Messiah, which was in spring 28 Common Era, to the siege of Yerushalayim, which was in spring of 70 Common Era. The 70th week is already accounted for and includes things that must take place at the beginning of Yahushua's 1,000-year reign. This leaves the 69th week to be reckoned. So that's what's left in the 70 weeks count. While doing this, we must remember that DaniEl 9 verse 25 associates the 69th week with Messiah the Prince, so we have to fulfill that. There has to be something about the 69th week that is associated with Messiah the Prince, and we will see exactly what that is. This servant will show how the 69th week has to do with the little horn of the fourth beast, the anti-Messiah, the scarlet beast, and how Yahushua's return is associated with the 69th week. The 69th week, emergence of the little horn of the fourth beast, anti-Messiah, proof scriptures number 1. DaniEl 9:27 identifies a 1-week, 7-year period wherein the little horn of the fourth beast will put an end to offerings right after the first 3.5-year period ends, and he begins to take his authority to wear out and overcome the Kedoshim, the set apart ones, for 3.5 years, or 42 months, or time, times, and half a time, or 1,260 days. Scriptures that support this interpretation and reveal who the beast in the book of Revelation is include DaniEl chapter 2 verses 32 through 34, and we're going to go there right now. DaniEl chapter 2 verses 32 through 34. DaniEl chapter 2 verse 32. This image's head was of fine gold. This is speaking of the great image from the book of DaniEl. This image's head was of fine gold, its chest and arms of silver, its belly and thighs of bronze, its legs of iron, its feet partly of iron and partly of clay. You were looking on until a stone was cut out without hands, and it smote the image on its feet of iron and clay, and broke them in pieces. Now right here in verse 34 of chapter 2 of DaniEl, this is referring to the legs of iron is Rome when they first began their empire and all the things that they did. The feet that are partly of iron and partly of clay are still considered the fourth beast, still considered a part of Rome, but it's going to be the reign that is established in the end times that's going to be mixed with nations. You're going to have nations a part of it as well. And we're going to see that it's that part of this reign, which is the feet, That's where this stone that's cut out without hands, which represents YHWSHWA, he's going to smite the image there. So that's going to be that battle in Revelation 19 at Har Megiddo. Now, in DaniEl chapter 2, we're also going to read verses 37 through 44. Verse 37, You, O sovereign, are a sovereign of sovereigns, for Allah of the heavens has given you a reign, power, and strength, and preciousness. Now he was speaking to the king, the sovereign of Babel. So now we know that he is the head of gold, as we're going to read in verse 38 now. And wherever the children of men dwell, or the beasts of the field, and the birds of the heavens, he has given them into your hand, and he has made you ruler over them all. You are the head of gold. So now we have Babylon, the head of gold of the image. Verse 39, And after you rises up another reign, lower than yours. Now that's speaking of Medo-Persia. That's the other reign that arose after Babel. And that middle reign was the chest of silver on the image. And another third reign of bronze that rules over all the earth. The third reign of bronze is speaking of Greece. And going back to DaniEl chapter 2 verse 32, it explains that the second reign, which is Medo-Persia, has the chest and arms of silver, and that the third reign, which now we know is Greece, has its belly and thighs of bronze. Okay, so again, going back to DaniEl 39, regarding the third reign, it says, And another third reign of bronze that rules over all the earth, which is Greece. Now verse 40, And the fourth reign is as strong as iron, because iron crushes and shatters all. So, like iron that breaks in pieces, it crushes and breaks all these. So this was Rome, the fourth reign. Verse 41, Yet, as you saw the feet and toes, partly of potter's clay and partly of iron, the reign is to be divided. So it's going to be shared among other nations. But some of the strength of the iron is to be in it, because you saw the iron mixed with muddy clay. And the toes of the feet were partly of iron and partly of clay. So the reign is partly strong and partly brittle. We're going to be reading in Revelation chapter 17 to get a deeper understanding of this soon. Verse 44, I apologize, actually verse 43. And as you saw iron mixed with muddy clay, they are mixing themselves with the seed of men. So that makes me think that there's something supernatural about this fourth reign that is demonic. And we know that that is exactly what's going to happen. That this fourth beast, the little horn of the fourth beast, which is the scarlet beast in the book of Revelation, which is the anti-Messiah, he is demonic. He is seed of the serpent. And he's going to be the one behind this. And yet he's going to be mixing himself with other nations, with men. So here we have in verse 43 of DaniEl chapter 2, they are mixing themselves with the seed of men, but they are not clinging to each other, even as iron does not mix with clay. Verse 44, And in the days of these sovereigns, the Allah of the heavens shall set up a reign which shall never be destroyed, nor the reign pass on to other people. It crushes and puts an end to all these reigns, and it shall stand forever. Praise Yah. And if you all are familiar with Revelation chapter 19, then you know that that's when the Messiah comes to do battle. And he overcomes this reign and then establishes his own reign afterwards for 1,000 years. Let us go to the book of Revelation chapter 17 for some more understanding of these 10 toes that we read about in DaniEl chapter 2. Revelation 17, And we're going to read from verses 7 to verses 18. Revelation 17 verse 7. And the messenger said to me, Why did you marvel? Let me explain to you the secret of the woman and of the beast she rides, which has the 7 heads and the 10 horns. Now this beast is the scarlet beast, the same as the little horn from the book of DaniEl. And the woman is referring to Mystery Babylon, the whore of Babel, the mother of harlots. Verse 8. The beast that you saw was, and is not, and is about to come up out of the pit of the deep, and goes to destruction. And you're going to see when we read in Revelation chapter 11, that at the end of the 2 witnesses' reign, the beast, it says he comes out of the deep. And it's the exact same thing you're reading about here, because it's referring to him. Him who's about to come out of the pit of the deep and goes to destruction, because he will be cast into the lake of fire in Revelation chapter 19 at that battle at Har Megiddo. And those dwelling on the earth, whose names are not written in the book of life, Chai, from the foundation of the world, shall marvel when they see the beast that was and is not, and that means he's going to die. You're going to be seeing additional scripture that proves that he's going to receive a fatal wound and that he's going to come back. And yet is. Here is the mind having wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman sits. So this is speaking of 7 sovereigns. Those mountains represent. And there are 7 sovereigns. And it says 5 have fallen, and 1 is, and the other has not yet come. And when he comes, he has to remain a little while. So we see that during the time of Yochanan, who wrote this, when he says the 5 have fallen, we can account for those 5 as Egypt, Assyria, Babel, Medo-Persia, and Greece. And all of those had fallen at the time when Yochanan had these things written. And the one that he says, one is, that's the 6th one, which is Rome, because Rome was still in power. And then when he said, and the other has not yet come, he's speaking of the 7th, which is, this is the hidden beast. This is the anti-Messiah, but they're not going to know that that's what he's there for. So that's during the beginning of the 3.5 years when he's hidden. So he's actually going to be the 7th, and then he's also going to be known as the 8th, because like we said, he's going to die, and he's going to be restored back to life. So speaking of the 7th, Yochanan receives this message from the messenger that says, and when he comes, he has to remain a little while. That's referring to him saying that he's going to die. Verse 11, and the beast that was and is not and is himself also the 8th and is of the 7. So again, he is the 7th and the 8th, because when he's restored back, he's considered an 8th, but he is still of the 7 because he is the 7th. Verse 12, and the 10 horns which you saw are 10 sovereigns, who have not yet received a reign, but receive authority as sovereigns with the beast for 1 hour. So these are those 10 toes in the image in the book of DaniEl chapter 2 that we just read about. Verse 13, they have one mind, and they shall give their power and authority to the beast. They shall fight with the Lamb, and the Lamb shall overcome them, for he is master of masters and sovereign of sovereigns, and those with him, with the Lamb, are called and chosen and trustworthy. Now, this is referring to that battle at Har Megiddo. It takes place in Revelation 19. So it's saying that these nations here, the 10 horns, are going to actually be there as part of the army of the beast and the false prophet. They're going to actually fight with the Lamb. But we know they will not prevail. Verse 15, and he said to me, the waters which you saw, where the whore sits, are peoples and crowds and nations and tongues. Verse 16, and the 10 horns which you saw on the beast, these shall hate the whore, and lay her waste, and naked, and eat her flesh, and burn her with fire. Verse 17, for the Almighty Elohim did give it into their hearts to do his mind, to be of one mind, and to give their reign to the beast, until the words of the Almighty shall be accomplished. And the woman whom you saw is that great city having sovereignty over the sovereigns of the earth, Bavel. So we know that this woman, Bavel, which is a system, has sovereignty over all the nations. She has fornicated with them all in wickedness and in injustice. So now we have shown how Revelation 17 verses 7 through 18 talk about this same scarlet beast, the little horn from the fourth beast of the book of DaniEl chapter 2, and the 10 toes. We understand that they are 10 horns that represent 10 sovereigns. And we also showed how YHWSHWA is the stone that strikes the feet at his return at Har Megiddo. And we're going to find that in Revelation 19, and I'm going to read verses 19 through 21. Revelation 19:19, and I saw the beast and the sovereigns of the earth and their armies gathered together to fight him who sat on the horse and his army. And the beast was seized, and with him the false prophet who worked signs in his presence, by which he led astray those who received the mark of the beast, and those who worshipped his image. The 2 were thrown alive into the lake of fire burning with sulfur. And the rest were killed with the sword which came from the mouth of him who sat on the horse, and all the birds were filled with their flesh. Praise Yah. So there we see proof. This is that battle at Har Megiddo. And there we see proof that this is where the stone strikes the feet of the image. Again, the 69th week, emergence of the little horn of the fourth beast, which is anti-Messiah. Here are more proof scriptures. This is proof scriptures number 2. So we'll go to the bottom here, and we'll go to DaniEl chapter 7. Going back to DaniEl. Chapter 7. And we're going to be reading from verses 7 through 14. DaniEl 7, verse 7. After this I looked in the night visions, and saw a fourth beast, fearsome and burly, exceedingly strong, and it had great iron teeth. And we remember that in DaniEl chapter 2, it referred to this the little horn of the fourth beast, or the fourth beast itself, as being iron, being very strong. It devoured and crushed and trampled down the rest with its feet, and it was different from all the beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns. This is the exact same beast we just read about in the book of Revelation, chapter 17. Verse 8, I was thinking about the horns, then saw another horn, a little horn, coming up among them. Now this little horn, again, this is the anti-Messiah that arises from this fourth beast, coming up among them, and 3 of the first horns were plucked out by the roots before it. Now speaking of this little horn, and see, eyes like the eyes of a man were given in this horn, and a mouth speaking great words. And we're going to be reading about that, and we've already read about it in the previous teachings, that he speaks great blasphemies, this little horn, against the Almighty. Verse 9, I was looking until thrones were set up, and the Ancient of Days was seated. His garment was white as snow, and the hair of his head was like clean wool. His throne was flames of fire, its wheels burning fire. A stream of fire was flowing and continuing forth from his presence, and 1,000 thousands served him, and 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him. and the judge was seated, and the books were opened. Now, I was looking then, before we continue, we have to understand that this is a time of judgment, and this is a time when the Almighty will judge and rule, that the time of the beast's reign is over, that he was given a 3.5 year period, 42 months, to overcome and wear out the set apart ones. And that after that, now judgment is given to the set apart ones, and they will take over this reign as the Messiah's 1,000-year reign will be established. Going back to verse 11 in DaniEl 7, I was looking then, because of the sound of the great words which the horn was speaking. Again, this is the little horn. I was looking until the beast was killed, and its body destroyed and given to the burning fire. And again, in Revelation 19, you see that this scarlet beast will be cast alive into the lake of fire. And the rest of the beasts had their rule taken away, but a lengthening of life was given to them for a season and a time. I was looking in the night visions, and saw one like the son of Enosh coming with the clouds of the heavens. And he came to the Ancient of Days, and they brought him near before him. And we know this is speaking of YHWSHWA approaching his Father. And to him, to YHWSHWA, was given rulership and preciousness and a reign, that all peoples, nations, and languages should serve him. His rule is an everlasting rule, which shall not pass away, and his reign that which shall not be destroyed. Again, this is that millennial 1,000-year reign that is given unto the Son of the Almighty, to YHWSHWA. Verse 15. No, I apologize. We're stopping right here. We're stopping right here, and then we're going to go forward to verse 17. We're going to read verses 17 through 27 now. These great beasts, which are four sovereigns, which rise up from the earth. Then the set apart ones of the Most High shall receive the reign, and possess the reign forever, even forever and ever. Then I desired for certainty concerning the fourth beast, which was different from all the others, very fearsome, with its teeth of iron and its nails of bronze, which devoured, crushed, and trampled down the rest with its feet. And concerning the 10 horns that were on his head, and the other horn that came up, which is the little horn, before which 3 fell. This horn, the little horn, which had eyes and a mouth, which spoke great words, whose appearance was greater than his fellows. I was looking, and this horn, the little horn, was fighting against the set apart ones, and was prevailing against them. That's the 42 months, the 3.5 years that's given to this little horn. The end of the 7-year period, which is the 69th week. Verse 22, until the Ancient of Days came, and right ruling was given to the set apart ones of the Most High, and the time came, and the set apart ones took possession of the reign. So here we see that it's fulfilled, that this judgment has just been made. That these set apart ones who were being prevailed against, being overcome by this little horn, now his time is up. After that 3.5 years, at the very close, Messiah will be there to put an end to that reign, to that rulership. Verse 23. This is what he said. The fourth beast is the fourth reign on earth, which is different from all other reigns, and it devours all the earth, tramples it down and crushes it. And the 10 horns are 10 sovereigns from this reign. They shall rise, and another shall rise after them, and it is different from the first ones, and it humbles 3 sovereigns. And it speaks great words against the Most High, and it wears out the set apart ones of the Most High, and it intends to change appointed times and law, and they are given into its hand for a time and times and half a time. So there we see time, times, and half a time, which is the 3.5-year period, 42 months, the second half of the 69th week. Verse 26, but the judgments shall sit, and they shall take away its rule, to cut off and to destroy until the end. And the reign and the rulership and the greatness of the reigns under all the heavens shall be given to the people, the set apart ones of the Most High. His reign, speaking of YHWSHWA, is an everlasting reign, and all rulerships shall serve and obey him. Praise Yah. So it's very clear that we are interpreting DaniEl chapter 2, DaniEl chapter 7, and Revelation chapter 17 correctly. This is all referring to the same person. Let's go back to Revelation chapter 11 now and look at a scripture that I referred to. Revelation 11. We're going to read verses 2 and 3. It says, Revelation 11:2, but cast out the court which is outside the dwelling place. This is going to be a so-called temple that's going to be built in the end times. And this is going to be the one that the evil one, that this anti-Messiah, this little horn, this scarlet beast, is going to go in and corrupt during his 3.5 years, 42 months. So it says here, because measurements were being made in verse 1, but the Almighty said, cast out the court which is outside the dwelling place, and do not measure it, for it has been given to the nations, and they shall trample the set apart city, which is Jerusalem, underfoot for 42 months. Again, that's the second half of this 69th week. The second half of the 7-year period of the 69th week, when this will happen. Verse 3, and I shall give unto my 2 witnesses, and they shall prophesy 1,260 days, clad in sackcloth. Now these 2 witnesses are going to have the beginning of the 69th week, the first 3.5 months, the first 1,260 days. They will be giving their witness. And the beast will be on the scene. The scarlet beast will be on the scene, but he's going to be hidden until his 3.5 years are over, and then you're going to see what he's going to do. Let's read Revelation 11:7 and see what he does at the end of the 2 witnesses 3.5 year of prophesying. Let's see, 11 verse 7 of Revelation. And when they have ended their witness, speaking of the 2 witnesses, the beast coming up out of the pit of the deep shall fight against them and overcome them and kill them. So right at the end of their 3.5 years, which is the beginning of the 69th week, this beast now is made manifest for who he truly is and kills them. This is right as he's transitioning to beginning his 3.5 year period. So let us go now to Revelation 12 verse 3 so we can continue to understand these things. Revelation 12 verse 3, and another sign was seen in heaven, and see a great fiery red dragon having 7 heads and 10 horns and 7 crowns on his heads. This does sound very similar to how the scarlet beast is described, but there are some subtle differences. So they both do have 7 heads, and they both do have 10 horns. Now this one is spoken of as a red dragon, and there is a difference. So we have to understand that the red dragon, as we'll continue to read, he's the serpent, he's Hashatan, and the scarlet beast is his seed, the serpent seed, which is the anti-Messiah. So let's continue to read chapter 12 verse 6 of Revelation. And the woman fled into the wilderness, where she has a place prepared by the Almighty, to be nourished there 1,260 days. Now, in another teaching in this, another part of this DaniEl 70 weeks teaching, I shared how I believe that the woman here is scattered Israel, who's going to be kept in the wilderness of the nations. She's going to be kept and nourished for that 1,260 days, which is a 3.5 year period. Now, we must understand that the time when this is going to be necessary is that second half of the 69th week, when this beast takes his authority. That's when the great persecution will be happening. That's when scattered Israel will need to be kept, and that's when it will happen. Let us look at 12 verse 14. again, and the woman which I believe is scattered Israel was given 2 wings of a great eagle to fly into the wilderness to her place, where she is nourished for a time, times, and half a time, and we already established that that's the 3.5-year period, from the presence of the serpent. So you see, the serpent is Shatan, and his son, his seed, which is the scarlet beast, the anti-Messiah, is going to be doing his father's will during his 42 months, his 3.5 years, during this time, times, and half a time, which is the second half of the 69th week. So the Almighty is protecting scattered Israel from the presence of the serpent. They're not going to be able to touch his people who are scattered. So now looking at again, still Revelation chapter 12, going to verse 14. I apologize, we just read 14. Going to verse 17. And the dragon, which is this same Hashatan, the dragon was enraged with the woman, and he went to fight with the remnant of her seed. So he's not able to do anything to scattered Israel. But then he turns his attention to the remnant of her seed. So these are also Yisraelites, okay? These are going to be Yisraelites, and I believe that they will be in the proximity of the land of Yehuda, specifically in proximity to the set apart city, Yerushalayim. Now, what's peculiar about these Yisraelites is going to be that they are guarding the commands of the Almighty, which is not peculiar. The Torah is kept by many Yisraelites. But what's very peculiar is it says, and possessing the witness of Yahshua Messiah. So that makes them believers in the Messiah Yahshua, which is more peculiar. Now, I believe that these ones here are the ones who are going to be beheaded. I believe that they are this special group of martyrs for whom it is given that when the Messiah comes for his bride, which I believe will happen after the 6th seal is open, and that we see evidence of the bride being before the throne in Shamayim in Revelation 7, I believe that these are going to come to faith, to emunah in the Messiah after that period. So they are likened to the 5 foolish virgins, the ones who were not ready when the bridegroom came, and yet they're still going to have this salvation. They're still going to possess the witness of Messiah Yeshua. So they're going to come to faith later, and that could be the reason why they are actually become martyrs. Praise the Almighty. But I believe that that is speaking of these same ones, those guarding the commands of the Almighty and possessing the witness of Yeshua Messiah. If you were to go to Revelation 14 verse 2, you would see that there's a connection there again between those who will be martyred and these here that the serpent puts his attention to, this dragon puts his attention to, after he cannot touch the woman which is scattered Israel. Praise Yah. So let us go to Revelation 13, and we're going to read the entire chapter to, again, get an understanding of who this scarlet beast is. Revelation 13, I'll start reading at verse 1. And I stood on the sand of the sea, and I saw a beast coming up out of the sand of the sea, having 7 heads, just like the dragon, and 10 horns, just like the dragon, and on his head and on his horns 10 crowns, and on his heads names of blasphemy. And the beast I saw was like a leopard, and his feet were like the feet of a bear, and his mouth like the mouth of a lion. And the dragon gave him his power and his throne and great authority. We'll pause right there. We know the dragon is already revealed in Revelation chapter 12 that he is the serpent, that he is Hashatan. So we see a distinction here between this beast, which is known as the scarlet beast in Revelation, and the dragon, that they are not the same person. Praise the Almighty. Verse 3, and I saw one of his heads, speaking of the scarlet beast, as having been slain to death, and his deadly wound was healed, and all the earth marveled after the beast. And we just read that in Revelation chapter 17, that this anti-Messiah is going to be the 7th and the 8th, so of the sovereigns that make up this beast that we're seeing here. He's going to be the 7th, he's going to be wounded, and he's going to be restored to life as the 8th, which is also of the 7 and was the 7th. And so here we see evidence of that in verse 3, that one of his heads was slain to death, and his deadly wound was healed. So he was restored back to life. And all the earth marveled after the beast. Verse 4, and they worshipped the dragon, who gave authority to the beast. And they worshipped the beast, saying, who is like the beast? Who is able to fight with him? And he was given a mouth speaking great matters and blasphemies. And he was given authority to do so 42 months. There we see the connection with DaniEl chapter 7. And we see proof that this is that same little horn from DaniEl. And we see the evidence of the 42 months, which is the 3.5-year period. And again, this is the second half of the 69th week. Verse 6 of DaniEl chapter 13. I apologize, of Revelation chapter 13. And he opened his mouth in blasphemies against the Almighty, to blaspheme his name and his tent, and those dwelling in the heaven. And it was given to him to fight with the set apart ones, and to overcome them. And authority was given to him over every tribe and tongue and nation. And all those dwelling on the earth, whose names have not been written in the Lamb's book in the book of life of the slain Lamb, from the foundation of the world, shall worship him. If anyone has an ear, let him hear. He who brings into captivity shall go into captivity. Praise Yah. So this one who will take set apart people captive will himself go into captivity in the lake of fire. He who kills with the sword has to be killed with the sword. And again, this is through the commands of this little horn. Set apart ones are going to be beheaded, certain martyrs. And again, he will also suffer destruction himself, which is the second death. Here is the endurance and the belief of the set apart ones. Now, I'm not really trying to do a teaching on the martyrs, but right there, that's where you would hold on to that verse right there to make a connection later on in Revelation chapter 14 about who these martyrs are. Here is the endurance and the belief of the set apart ones. Now, verse 11, and I saw another beast coming up out of the earth, and he had 2 horns, like a lamb, and spoke like a dragon. And he exercises all the authority of the first beast in his presence, and causes the earth and those who dwell in it to worship the first beast, whose deadly wound was healed. So this is the one that is known as the false prophet. And he does great signs, so that he even makes fire come down from the heaven on the earth before men. And he leads astray those dwelling on the earth because of those signs which he was given to do before the beast, saying to those dwelling on the earth to make an image to the beast, who was wounded by the sword yet lived. And there was given to him to give spirit to the image of the beast, or life, that the image of the beast should both speak and cause to be killed as many as would not worship the image of the beast. So, excuse me. So this is where we have the image set up. And I believe it's going to be set up in the very set apart place of the Almighty. In his so-called temple, it's going to be built at this time, in these end times. And this image is going to be alive. And the image will cause to be put to death. And I believe it's going to be through beheading any who do not bow down and worship the beast. And again, that's where we have the martyrs that I spoke of, who they will not be beheaded. They're going to be in the proximity. They're going to be close by. They're going to be subjected to this. And yet, they are going to choose to be beheaded rather than to bow down and worship this beast, this image of the beast. Verse 16. And he causes all, both small and great, and rich and poor, and free and slave, to be given a mark upon their right hand or upon their foreheads, and that no one should be able to buy or sell except he that has the mark, or the number, or the name of the beast, or the number of his name. Here is the wisdom. He who has understanding, let him calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and his number is 666. So, again, here we see evidence that all these scriptures are tying in, and it's all referring to this anti-Messiah and the false prophet who will be with him. Let's see here. We're in DaniEl 13, and I would like for us to go to DaniEl 17. I apologize, Revelation 17. And I'm not going to read 7 through 11 because we already read that. That's where it explains who these sovereigns are, who the seven heads are, the seven mountains on which the Whore of Babel sits, and who they are. And we've pretty much read that already, and how the seventh is one of the eighth, and who the 10 horns are. We don't really have to read that right now because we just read it. That's already been established. So here are some more proof scriptures. Number 3. This time we'll go to the book of DaniEl, chapter 8. And we'll read from verses 9 through 26. DaniEl chapter 8, verse 9. This is speaking of the anti-Messiah. And from one of them came a little horn. And we know who the little horn is, the beast, which became exceedingly great toward the south, and toward the east, and toward the splendid land. We know that's speaking of the set apart land of the Almighty. And it became great up to the host of the heavens, and it caused some of the hosts and some of the stars to fall to the earth, and trampled them down. You know, and we understand that that's speaking of the messengers who turned, and that's spoken of in the book of Revelation also. I believe it's chapter 12. It talks about the stars that fell. It even exalted itself as high as the prince of the hosts. So this little horn exalted himself or itself as high as YHWSHWA himself. And it took that which is continual away from him, and threw down the foundation of his set apart place. So we see exactly what this little horn is going to do. He's going to put an end to the offerings at the beginning of his 3.5-year period, which is the second half of the 69th week. And he's going to trample down the foundation of the set apart place of that, temple that will be built in the end times. And because of transgression, an army was given over to oppose that which is continual. And again, the offerings, that's that which is continual. And it threw the truth down to the ground, and it acted and prospered. Again, it is given authority for 42 months. Then I heard a certain set apart one speaking, and another set apart one said to that certain one who was speaking, "Till when is the vision concerning that which is continual, the offerings, and the transgression that lays waste, this scarlet beast, to make both the set apart place and the host to be trampled underfoot?" So again, these are those things that it has done that have to be corrected, that had to be made right. Verse 14, and he said to me, for 2,300 nights. And again, I explained in another teaching that actually means days. Erev Boker, which is the days, the entire day period that begins with the evening, goes into the night, and then again continues with the morning and the daylight period. So 2,300 days. Verse 14, then that which is set apart will be made right. So again, we have to keep these things in mind. Verse 15, and it came to be when I, DaniEl, had seen the vision, Then I saw understanding, and see, before me stood one having the appearance of a mighty man. And I heard a man's voice between Ulai, who called and said, Gabriel, make this man understand the vision. He then came near where I stood, and when he came, I feared, and I fell on my face. But he said to me, Understand, Son of man, for the vision is for the time of the end times. And as he was speaking with me, I fell stunned upon my face to the ground, but he touched me and made me stand up straight, and said, Look, I am making known to you what shall take place in the latter time of the wrath. And again, during the time of the 42 months of the beast's reign, during this second half of the 69th week, we're going to see that the 7 bowls of wrath are poured out right before the Messiah comes with his army in Revelation 19 to do battle with this beast and his false prophet and his army of the nations. So as it says here in verse 19, these things will be, he's going to explain the things taking place in the latter time of the wrath. Praise Yah. For at the appointed time shall be the end. Verse 20, the ram which you saw having 2 horns are the sovereigns of Media and Persia. And the male goat is the sovereign of Greece. And the large horn between its eyes is the first sovereign, again, of Greece. Verse 22, and that it was broken and 4 stood up in its place are 4 rulerships arising out of that nation, but not in its power. And that's again what happened to Greece. 23, now this is speaking of Rome. And in the latter time of their rule, when the transgressors have filled up their measure, a sovereign fierce of face and skilled at intrigues shall stand up. Now this is speaking of anti-Messiah, that this scarlet beast. Verse 24, and his power shall be mighty, but not by his own power. Again, the nations, those 10 sovereigns are going to give up their reigns to this beast. They're going to join themselves to him. They're going to empower him, so it's not through his own power. And he shall destroy incredibly, and shall prosper and thrive, and destroy mighty men and the set apart people. Again, he's given 42 months authority to overcome the set apart ones. Verse 25, and through his skill he shall make deceit prosper in his hand, and hold himself to be great in his heart, and destroy many who are at ease, and even stand against the prince of princes. So that's when he goes to Har Megiddo to have that battle, which Revelation 19 describes, with the prince of princes, which is Yeshua the Messiah. Yet without hand he shall be broken, because he's going to be cast alive into the lake of fire, which is the second death. So that's his end. Verse 26, and what was said in the vision of the evening and morning, which is Erev and Boker, is truth. And hide the vision, for it is after many days. So in the time of DaniEl, it was hidden. Now in our time, it's not hidden anymore. It's revealed. It's exposed, because we're literally living in these last days. Praise the Almighty. Now we're going to go back to the book of Revelation. And we're going to go to chapter 12, verse 4. And again, and the reason we're doing this is because what we read about how this little horn is going to throw, I apologize, he's going to cause some of the hosts and some of the stars to fall to the earth and trample them down. And that's in DaniEl 8, verse 10. So we're going to see how that is fulfilled in Revelation 12, verse 4. And his tail, this is speaking of the dragon, his tail draws 1/3 of the stars of the heaven and throws them to the earth. Praise Yah. So that is fulfilled. We're also going to look at Revelation 12, verse 9. And the great dragon was thrown out, that serpent of old, called the devil and Shaitan, who leads all the world astray. He was thrown to the earth, and his messengers were thrown out with him. So we see that those stars that were cast down with him are his actual messengers. let us look now at Revelation 19, which I referred to previously, which is that battle at Har Megiddo, and we'll see the end of this scarlet beast again. Revelation 19, 19 through 21. And I saw the beast and the sovereigns of the earth and their armies gathered together to fight him who sat on the horse and his army. And the beast was seized, and with him the false prophet who worked signs in his presence, by which he led astray those who received the mark of the beast and those who worshipped his image. The two were thrown alive into the lake of fire, burning with sulfur. And the rest were killed with the sword which came from the mouth of him who sat on the horse, which is YHWSHWA. Excuse me. And all the birds were filled with their flesh. Praise the Almighty. So there we see the end of this beast and the false prophet and the army as well that is with them. And we're going to go back to Revelation, I apologize, to the book of Bereshit, Genesis chapter 3, because we're going to see how this is a fulfillment. This victory of the Lamb, who is sovereign of sovereigns and master of masters, this is a fulfillment. Him defeating the serpent's seed, which is this beast, this scarlet beast, is a fulfillment of the book of Genesis chapter 3 verses 14 through 15. Genesis chapter 3 verse 14. And YHWSHWA, the Almighty, said to the Nachash, to the serpent, because you have done this, you are cursed more than all livestock and more than every beast of the field. On your belly you are to go and eat dust all the days of your life. And we know that that serpent, this Nachash, represents Hashatan himself. And I put enmity between you and the woman, and between your seed. So here we have the serpent seed, the seed of Nachash. And we know Nachash is the red dragon. So the seed of Nachash here is referring to the scarlet beast, the little horn, the anti-Messiah. I put enmity between your seed and her seed. And her seed is the Messiah, YHWSHWA, the Son of Man, as we know him, the son of Adam. He shall crush your head. Speaking of YHWSHWA, what he's going to do when he defeats the scarlet beast, the false prophet and their armies. And you shall crush his heel, because again, YHWSHWA was hurt. He was offered. He was cut off, as the book of DaniEl words it. So he did suffer for us, but yet his wound was not a destruction. In fact, the Almighty used it as the greatest blessing we could ever receive, which is to have our sins carried, borne for us, and for him to be accepted as an offering for our sins, and for him to rise on the third day, and for us to have this chai, and the set apart Ruach through him. So, even though his heel, in defeating the seed of the serpent, the Messiah was hurt, but yet he has the victory. He has crushed the head. When you crush the head of a serpent, you've killed it. And that's exactly what this means. He has destroyed the enemy in every way through this. So praise Yah. We see that this is a great fulfillment of an old scripture. So mankind waited so long for this great deliverance. We know that when the Messiah came, when the Word was made flesh, that was the beginning of the descendants of Adam being able to see this deliverance. And then here we see it fulfilled, the victory. I would say that this final victory, even though there's going to be another battle after the 1,000-year reign of the Messiah, but this final victory before the 1,000-year reign begins. Praise Yah. So here are some more proof scriptures. Number 4, we'll go to the bottom of this slide, and we'll go back to DaniEl. And this time we're going to go to chapter 11, and we'll be reading verses 21 through 45. DaniEl 11, and I'll be reading 21 through 45. And this is speaking of the anti-Messiah. Again, in verse 21. And in his place shall arise a despised one. This despised one is the anti-Messiah, to whom they shall not give the excellency of the rule, but he shall come in peaceably and seize the rule by flatteries. And again, this fits perfectly with this anti-Messiah who is the scarlet beast, that at the beginning of the 69th week, during the first 3.5 years, he's hidden as far as who he really is and what he's really going to do. So he comes in peaceably and he seizes the rule through flatteries, but yet at the end of the 3.5 years, we know that he's going to kill those 2 witnesses and begin his 42 months, his 3.5 years of wicked rule. Verse 22, and the arms of the flood shall be swept away before him, and be broken, and also the prince of the covenant. Praise Yah. And after they joined him, he shall work deceit, and shall come up and become strong with a small nation. He shall enter peaceably, even into the richest places of the province, and do what his fathers have not done, nor his forefathers, distribute among them plunder and spoil and supplies, and devise his plots against the strongholds, but only for a time. And he shall stir up his power and his heart against the sovereign of the south with a great army, and the sovereign of the south shall be stirred up to battle with a very great and mighty army, but not stand, for they shall devise plots against him. I'm sorry, I want to check something real quick. Okay, we're going to 45. Okay, we're on 26. And those who have been eating his food shall destroy him, and his army be swept away, and many fall down slain. So that's speaking of this king of the south, sovereign of the south, this is going to happen to him. And both these sovereigns' hearts are to do evil and speak lies at the same table, but not prosper, for the end is still for an appointed time. Verse 28, then he shall return to his land with much supplies, and his heart be against the set-apart covenant. Again, this is the anti-Messiah. He's against the Torah, against the commandments. And he shall act and shall return to his land. And at the appointed time he shall return and go toward the south, but it shall not be like the former or the latter. For ships from Kittim shall come against him, and he shall lose heart, and shall return in rage against the set-apart covenant. See, again, against the set-apart covenant, which we know is the commandments, the Torah. And shall act, and shall return, and consider those who forsake the set-apart covenant. So again, remember, those whose names are not written in the Lamb's book of Chai, of life, they will take the mark. They will bow down and worship this beast. They will not keep the covenant, the commandment that says that you will have no other mighty one, and not to make an idol and things like that. They will bow down to the image. They will take the mark. Verse 31, and strong ones shall arise from him and profane the set-apart place. See, this is when he actually goes and begins to do these things against the temple that will be erected during our end times. So we see that strong ones arise from him and profane the set-apart place, the stronghold, and shall take away that which is continual. See, take away that which is continual. That again is those offerings. He's gonna put an end to those offerings, which DaniEl 9:27 says in the midst of the week, in the middle of the week. That's when that happened. So here we see more proof that this is speaking of the same person. And set up the abomination that lays waste. And I believe that's that image that we read about in Revelation chapter 13. That image that is going to be set up in that temple that's going to be built in our end times. He's going to set up the abomination that lays waste. And by flatteries he shall profane those who do wrong against the covenant. So all the ones who are not keeping the Torah are going to fall right into it and accept and receive him. But the people who know their Almighty shall be strong and shall act. So you will have those who do not take the mark. You will have those who do keep the covenant of his people. And those of the people who have insight shall give understanding to many. And they shall stumble by sword and flame and by captivity and plundering 4 days. So again, the 42 months that's given to this beast, this scarlet beast, the authority he's given to overcome, to wear out the set apart ones. And when they stumble, they shall be helped, a little help, but many shall join them by flatteries. And some of those who have insight shall stumble, to refine them, and to cleanse them, and to make them white until the time of the end, for it is still for an appointed time. So we see there that the Almighty is going to use this opportunity to refine his people. I believe it's those who are going to be in Yehuda, in the land of Yehuda, in proximity to these things that are going to be happening. He's going to be refining his people, cleansing them, bringing them to his truth. Verse 36, and the sovereign shall do as he pleases and exalt himself. Again, this is speaking of the anti-Messiah, the scarlet beast. Exalt himself and show himself to be great above every mighty one, and speak incredible matters against the El of mighty ones, or Almighty Yah, and shall prosper until the wrath has been accomplished. For what has been decreed shall be done. Again, he's going to have these 42 months to do his wickedness, and we will see the 7 bowls of wrath poured out, and then we will see Bavel fall at the 7th bowl of wrath, and we will see the Messiah YHWSHWA coming on the white horse to put an end to the reign of this scarlet beast in Revelation 19. Verse 37, and this, again speaking of this scarlet beast, and have no regard for the mighty ones of his fathers, nor the desire of women, nor for the desire of women, nor have regard for any mighty one, but exalt himself above them all. But in his place he shall give esteem to a mighty one of strongholds, and to a mighty one which his fathers did not know. He shall give esteem with gold and silver, with precious stones and costly gifts. Again, acts of idolatry, that's what he's going to be promoting. And he shall act against the strongest strongholds with a foreign mighty one, which he shall acknowledge. He shall increase in esteem and cause them to rule over many, and divide the land for gain. At that time of the end, the sovereign of the south shall push at him, and the sovereign of the north rush against him, like a whirlwind, with chariots, and with horsemen, and with many ships. And he shall enter the lands, and shall overflow and pass over, and shall enter the splendid land, and many shall stumble, but these escape from his hand, Edom, and Moab, and the chief of the sons of Ammon. In our time, we know that Moab and Ammon are in the land of modern-day Jordan. And Edom, we believe, is scattered throughout Europe. And he shall stretch out his hand against the lands, and the land of Mizraim shall not escape. And he shall rule over the treasures of gold and silver, and over all the riches of Mizraim, which is Egypt, and Libyans and Cushites shall be at his steps. North Africa, Eastern Africa. Then reports from the east and the north shall disturb him, and he shall go out with great wrath to destroy and put many under the ban. And then verse 45 tells us the end. It says, and he shall pitch the tents of his palace between the seas and the splendid set apart mountain, which we know is the mountain of the Almighty, but shall come to his end with none to help him. And again, that's that final battle in Revelation chapter 19, where we know that his end is the lake of fire. Praise the Almighty. We're going to continue reading in DaniEl. DaniEl chapter 12 verse 3, which says, and those who have insight shall shine like the brightness of the expanse, and those who lead many to righteousness like the stars forever. So again, you're going to have people of the Almighty, and I believe they're going to be in close proximity to Yerushalayim, in the land of Yehuda, and those who have insight, who have understanding of the things that are happening, they're going to be ministering to his people at this time during these 42 months. Praise Yah. Let us also read in DaniEl chapter 12. Let us read verses 7 through 12. Verse 7. And I heard the man dressed in linen, who was above the waters of the river, and he held up his right hand and his left hand to the heavens, and swore by him who lives forever, that it would be for an appointed time, appointed times, and half a time. So again, the 3.5 year period, the 42 months, the second half of the 69th week. And when they have ended scattering the power of the set apart people, then all these shall be completed. And I heard, but I did not understand. So I said, my master, what is the latter end of these matters? And he said, go, DaniEl, for the words are hidden and sealed till the time of the end. And again, that's the proof that we are in the time of the end, that all these things are being opened up to us now. Many shall be cleansed and made white and refined. Again, speaking of the people of Israel. But the wrong shall do wrong, and none of the wrong shall understand. Again, those are those who are whose names are not written in the Lamb's book of life. But those who have insight shall understand. Again, and I believe that that's going to come from the set apart Ruach. Even as we gain understanding from the Ruach, those will also receive understanding. Verse 11, and from the time that which is continual is taken away, and the abomination that lays waste is set up, is 1,290 days. So there we have, when the scarlet beast, anti-Messiah, begins his 3.5 year reign, his 42 months, we see here that the abomination that lays waste is going to be set up. And what I believe is that it's going to be 30 days into his 42-month reign. I believe that here, the 1,290 days is counting 1,260 days where the two witnesses were doing their prophecy. And then it's counting the first 30 days of the beast's reign. So that's where you get the 1290. 1260 plus 30 is 1290. So that's what this is referring to. And now verse 12 says, blessed is he who is waiting earnestly and comes to the 1,335 days. And again, this is referring to the millennial reign. If we go forward, because we know the beast is going to have 1,260 days of his own to reign, right? We know the first 30 were already taken in the first calculation, because we had the 1260, which was the two witnesses' time of prophesying, plus 30 days of the beast's reign, which made up the first 1290. So when we count the beast's reign, we can't count 1260. We have to start with 1230, because that's what is left to account for. So the first 30 days of the beast reign was already accounted for. So adding 1230, which is what is left of the beast reign, and then adding another 90 days, and then adding another 15 days, that's how you end up with these 1,335 days. So if you do the math on that, and again, that will just take you into the millennial reign, because once you add anything to the 1230, you're already beyond the 3.5 years of the beast reign. So the extra 90 and 15, which 90 represents 3 months and 15 represents half a month. So again, that is going to be at the beginning of the 1,000-year reign. That's why it says here, blessed is he who waits and gets to that point, because it's going to be beautiful, the things that are going to be happening during that time. Praise the Almighty. And we're going to go to the book of Revelation, chapter 6. Revelation Chazon, chapter 6, and we're going to read verses 9 through 11. Because we're trying to learn about this distinct group of set-apart Israelite martyrs, which will be overcome by the little horn during his 42 months. And we see evidence of this here. Revelation 6, 9 through 11 says, "And when he opened the fifth seal, I saw under the slaughter place," this is in Shamayim, "the beings of those having been slain for the word of the Almighty and for the witness which they held. And they cried with a loud voice, saying, How long, O Master, set apart and true, until you judge and avenge our blood on those who dwell on the earth? And there was given to each one a white robe, and they were told that they should rest a little while longer, until both their fellow servants and their brothers, who would be killed as they were, was completed." So we see that there are still more martyrs to come before the vengeance or the avenging for the martyrdom that has taken place among the people of the Almighty. Let us look at Revelation 12. And like I've shared, there's a distinct group, and I believe that they are specifically Israelite because they are the seed of the woman, and the woman represents scattered Israel. So let us go to, still in Revelation chapter 12, verse 17. And again, here we see it says, "And the dragon was enraged with the woman, which is scattered Israel, and he went to fight with the remnant of her seed, those guarding the commands of the Almighty and possessing the witness of YHWSHWA Messiah." So we see here, I'm going to show how these are the same ones. Let us remember the words that are being used here. Guarding the commands of the Almighty, possessing the witness of Messiah. And this is in relation to the seed of the woman, which is scattered Israel. So we're going to go now to Revelation 13:7. Revelation 13:7 says, regarding the beast, it says, "And it was given to him to fight with the set-apart ones and to overcome them. And authority was given to him over every tribe and tongue and nation." Okay, so we see what is happening. Let's go to 13:10. "He who brings into captivity shall go into captivity. He who kills with the sword has to be killed with the sword." You know, this beast that's being referred to in Revelation chapter 13, he's the one, when his image is set up, that's going to cause it to be that those who do not worship his image, bow down to him, take his mark, they will be beheaded. So here we see, he who kills with the sword has to be killed with the sword. So the last part of this verse 10 says, "Here is the endurance and the belief of the set apart ones." Now hold on to that text right there, because we're going to see a connection. Okay, just to understand that this is referring to those martyrs, which I believe are the remnant of the seed of the woman. So let us go now to 13 verse 15 in Revelation 13:15. It says, "And there was given to him to give spirit to the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak and cause to be killed as many as would not worship the image of the beast." So I already shared that with you all. Let us now go to Revelation 14, and let's look at verses 12 through 16. Verse 12 of Revelation 14 says, "Here is the endurance of the set apart ones." Interesting. Let's stop right there. Where does that sound familiar? We just read that in Revelation 13, verse 10. The last part says, "Here is the endurance and the belief of the set apart ones." So this is referring to those same ones. Here's the endurance of the set apart ones. Now let's pay attention to this part in verse 12 of chapter 14, Revelation. "Here are those guarding the commands of the Almighty and the belief of in the YHWSHWA, or of YHWSHWA." Now, where did we see that before? We saw those words in Revelation 12:17 when it's referring to the remnant of the woman. It says those guarding the commands of the Almighty and possessing the witness of Yahshua Messiah. So we see a connection here, that these are the ones who are going to be martyred. Praise Yah. Now, verse 13 of Revelation 14. And I heard a voice coming out of Shamayim saying to me, right, blessed are the dead who die in the Master from now on. So let's stop right here. Again, these people are about to die when this is said. They're about to be martyred. And it's being said, blessed are those who die in the Master from now on. Yes, says the Spirit, in order that they rest from their labors and their works follow with them. Praise Yah. They're going to be rewarded for their emunah, for their faithfulness. And I saw, and I looked and saw a white cloud, and sitting on the cloud was one like the son of Adam, who we know is Yahushua, having on his head a golden crown, and in his hand a sharp sickle. Praise Yah. And another messenger came out of the dwelling place, crying with a loud voice to the one sitting on the cloud, send your sickle and reap, because the hour has come for you to reap, because the harvest of the earth is ripe. And the one sitting on the cloud thrust in his sickle on the earth, and the earth was reaped. Now, I believe that this reaping has to do with the set apart ones here, these martyrs that are about to be killed. And when they are killed, then they are reaped. This is how they are gathered. Because as we continue to read in Revelation 15, we're going to see that these who were beheaded, now they're before the throne in Shamayim. So I believe that this reaping that takes place is actually the martyrs being gathered. So let us go to Revelation 15, verses 2 through 4. Revelation 15, verses 2 through 4. And I saw like a sea of glass mixed with fire, and those overcoming the beast and his image, and his mark, and the number of his name, standing on the sea of glass, holding harps of the Almighty. So we know these are these martyrs who were beheaded, and they did not take the mark. They were faithful unto death, and they were just reaped. They're before the throne. They're on the sea of glass. Verse 3, and they sing the song of Moshe, the servant of the Almighty. You know, the song of Moshe was sung during the time of deliverance from Mitzrayim, from Egypt, by Israelites. So that's why I say I believe that these are Israelites. And they sing the song of Moshe, the servant of the Almighty, and the song of the Lamb, because remember, these have received the Lamb before they die and before they are reaped. They have already received the Lamb before. That's what's peculiar about them, is that they are Israelites, but they're keeping the Torah, the commandments, but they also have the testimony of Yahushua within them. So they also sing the song of the Lamb, saying, great and marvelous are your works, YHWSHWA, El Shaddai, righteous and true are your ways, O sovereign of the set apart ones. Who shall not fear you, O Yah, and esteem your name? Because you alone are kind, because all nations shall come and shachah before you, for your righteousnesses have been made manifest. Praise Yah. So we'll pause right here, and we'll go to Revelation chapter 20, and we know that Revelation 19 is that final battle before the 1,000-year reign. In Revelation 20, we'll read from verses 4 through 6, and we'll see that these same ones who were reaped before and were in Shamayim, we're going to see that they are back on the earth at the time of the 1,000-year reign. Praise Yah. This is their reward for their faithfulness. So we read Revelation 20, starting from verse 4. And I saw thrones, and they that sat on them, and judgment was given to them. And I've shared before that in Matthew chapter 19, verse 28, Yahushua promised his 12 taught ones that they would sit on 12 thrones and judge the 12 tribes of Israel. So that is fulfilled there in the thrones that Yochanan sees here. and the lives of those who had been beheaded because of the witness they bore to YHWSHWA, and because of the word of the Almighty, and who did not worship the beast nor his image, and did not receive his mark upon their foreheads nor upon their hands, and they lived and reigned with the Messiah for 1,000 years. So there we see the millennial reign, the 1,000-year reign of Messiah, and we see that they will be there. And verse 5 says, and the rest of the dead did not come to life until the 1,000 years were ended. This is the first resurrection. So these martyrs are resurrected. But the rest of the dead do not come back to life until later on, which is the judgment. Verse 6, blessed and set apart is the one having part in the first resurrection. Now we have to understand that the first resurrection applies to all who are in Messiah, not just these martyrs, because some people think that that all those who are in Messiah are going to be beheaded, and that if we're not, then we're not part of this first resurrection. No, those who are going to be beheaded are a specific group of Israelite martyrs, and who are going to be keeping the Torah and have the witness of Messiah Yeshua. The first resurrection is for all, for whom it's been given, for whom, if your name is written in the Lamb's Book of Life, you're a partaker of that first resurrection, because the second death has no power over you. So here we see evidence of that. Blessed and set apart is the one having part in the first resurrection. The second death possesses no authority over these, but they shall be priests of the Almighty, Kohanim, and of Messiah, and shall reign with him 1,000 years. So again, that's for all those who are in Messiah, who will be partakers of this, including his taught ones, his 12 taught ones, like we read about in verse 4 of chapter 20 of Revelation, that they're going to be sitting on thrones, and judgment will be given to them. We're going to be reigning with Messiah, praise the Almighty. Not just these who will be beheaded. So we have to understand that everything has to be in its own proper context. So let us continue. Here's an overview of weeks from teachings parts 1, 2, and 3. In DaniEl 9:24, part 1 of this teaching, we found that the 70 weeks are weeks of years. 70 times 7 equals 490 years, not days. We also found that Yerushalayim and the house of YHWSHWA are built in the 70th week in the millennial reign. Some people think that the fulfillment of the 70th week is during the 7-year period in which the two witnesses do their 3.5 years of prophecy, and then the beast, the little horn, takes his authority and reigns for those 42 months, 3.5 years. However, that does not include the things that are mentioned here in DaniEl 9:24, that specifically these purposes, these goals have to do with the nation and his city. So the city Yerushalayim has to be built for the 70 weeks to be accomplished. And all the things that it says regarding his people also have to take place. And remember, these people are scattered. They have to be gathered. We found evidence of that as well, including the house of the Almighty, which has to be built, because DaniEl 9:24 says that the anointing of the most set apart place has to happen. So that's DaniEl 9:24. Now DaniEl 9:25, which is part 2 of this teaching, we found the count of the 70 weeks begins at 445 before Common Era, BCE, and contains pauses and resumptions. Weeks 1 through 62 were already fulfilled before Messiah was cut off, and until Messiah, in this scripture of DaniEl 9:25, is referring to Yahushua's return at the close of the 69th week, at the very end of it. That's when Messiah returns. That's his association with the 69th week. Weeks 63 through 68 are accounted for in DaniEl 9:26, part 3 of this teaching, where these weeks 63 through 68 are counted from Messiah's death in spring 28 Common Era to the siege of Yerushalayim in spring 70 Common Era. And here's an overview of weeks from teaching part 4, which is this one. DaniEl 9:27. Here we have found the 69th week is when the little horn peaceably makes a 7-year covenant, which he will break in the middle of the week when he puts an end to offerings to YHWSHWA, kills the 2 witnesses, and is revealed as the beast, who he really is. Now, again, this is week 69. Week 69 is counted from the beginning of the 2 witnesses' testimony after the 6th trumpet, and it continues to the end of the little horn's reign, which is when Messiah returns for battle at Har Megiddo, and we can find that in Revelation chapter 19. Now, in close proximity to week 69, we're also brought then to week 70. And week 70 again is described in DaniEl 9:24, but it's connected to week 69, so we have to mention it here. Week 70 is the beginning of Messiah's 1,000-year reign, when all his scattered nation returns, and Jerusalem and YHWH's house are built. And again, you can find that in DaniEl 9:24. Thank you for joining me for this 4-part teaching on the 70 weeks of DaniEl revealed. And here we have the only reference that I used for this teaching. All quotations in this work are from the Almighty YHWH's Word. I did still use the Institute for Scripture Research, ISR 2010, which is known as the Scriptures, and their 2009 edition. All praise to the Most High YHWH for blessing us with His understanding and His Word.